Caught her with my best friend, so I sent them a double wedding invitation. I didn't sleep the night I saw the video. It kept replaying in my head over and over again. Her laugh. His voice. The way they kissed like they didn't have a care in the world. Like they weren't both destroying something I had once thought was unbreakable. I sat there for hours, phone in my hand, staring at the screen, scrolling through every second like some kind of sick punishment. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was just hollow. Like my mind had detached from my body and I was watching it all from somewhere else. Detached. Frozen. And yet, beneath that numbness, something sharp was forming. Not rage. Not despair. Something colder. Something clearer. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. They wanted to play games behind my back? Fine. I'd create a game they couldn't win. The next morning, I forced myself through the motions. Showered. Dressed. Ate breakfast, though every bite tasted like cardboard. I acted normal when she came over. Smiled when she kissed me. Asked about her day. She looked me in the eye and lied without a flicker of guilt. I was with my sister last night. Movie night. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Pretending I wasn't watching the lie fall out of her mouth like it didn't mean a thing. She had no idea that I had seen it all, the hotel room, the way he touched her hair, the way she whispered his name. My best friend. Someone I'd known since childhood. Someone who had been there through everything. Birthdays. Breakups. College. Yeah? He was just another lie I had to erase from my life. That night, I opened my laptop and started building my plan. I wasn't going to fight fire with fire. I was going to outclass them. Outsmart them. I opened an old design template from when I helped my cousin with his wedding invites. I created 2 fake invitations, one for me and her and another from him and her. Both styled identically. Both announcing the same venue. Same date. Same time. A joint celebration of love, as I called it. And I made it seem like it had been in the works for months. I even made fake RSVP pages. I printed them on high-quality cardstock, slipped them into expensive-looking envelopes, and hand-addressed them with perfect calligraphy. Everything about it looked real because I wanted them to believe it was. Next came the guest list. I selected mutual friends. Family. Her coworkers. Even his parents. Anyone who knew either of them. I sent digital versions via email, too, just to double the effect. You are cordially invited to a joint wedding celebration for her name and my name and her name and his name. The wording was crafted to raise eyebrows but still sound plausible. In an intimate ceremony celebrating the complexity of love and modern relationships, some would question it, sure. But curiosity would do the rest. People would come just to see what the hell was going on. And that was exactly the point. I rented a venue, a real one. A beautiful outdoor space with white chairs, flowers, a faux altar. Just enough to look believable. I hired a photographer, a DJ, even a catering service that offered champagne and light hors d'oeuvres. I spared no detail. This wasn't just revenge. It was theater. And I wanted the whole audience present. As the date approached, I kept up appearances. Smiled at her. Chatted with him. Let them believe everything was normal. Meanwhile, I was finalizing the seating chart, adjusting lighting for dramatic effect, even scripting my speech. It had to be perfect, just enough honesty to sting, just enough dignity to land the final blow. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to let them expose themselves. The day before the wedding, I received a text from her. Can't believe tomorrow's the day. I'm so nervous and excited. I love you. I stared at it for a long moment before typing back, I love you too. It's going to be unforgettable. And I meant every word. The day was going to be unforgettable, just not for the reasons she thought. I had already confirmed that both she and he were attending. Separately. Unaware that they were walking into the same trap. The night before, I barely slept again. But this time, it wasn't pain keeping me awake. It was anticipation. I rehearsed my speech over and over, picturing the looks on their faces. I pictured the crowd's reaction. The silence. The gasps. The realization. I wasn't just delivering a message, I was telling a story. Their story. One they had written in secret. One I was about to read out loud. And when the sun came up, I dressed in my best suit, adjusted my tie, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see the man who had been betrayed. I saw the man who had taken the betrayal and turned it into power. I saw someone who wasn't afraid to face the truth or to show others what lies really looked like. Because by the end of that day, no one would ever see them the same again. And that was exactly what they deserved. The morning of the event arrived with a strange sense of calm. Not nerves, not guilt, just clarity. I arrived at the venue early, well before any guests would begin trickling in. The staff was already setting up the last touches, white folding chairs arranged in neat rows, rose petals scattered down a faux aisle, a champagne station chilling bottles under a white canopy. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting golden light across the neatly manicured lawn. It was almost too perfect, too beautiful for what was about to happen. And maybe that was the point. I wanted this moment to be everything they'd fantasized about when they snuck behind my back. Everything they thought they deserved. But instead of vows, they'd get exposure. Instead of applause, they'd hear silence. Instead of a celebration, they'd walk into a reckoning. I made sure the guest book was at the entrance, right next to a large framed welcome sign that read, "A Celebration of Truth." Beneath it, in smaller print, "Sometimes love writes its own endings." No one would understand it at first, but by the end, they would. I walked the perimeter of the venue, checked the sound system, rehearsed the delivery of my message one more time in my head. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to curse. I was going to speak like a man who had nothing to hide and everything to show. The first guests started to arrive just after noon. They came in pairs and small groups, dressed formally but with obvious confusion on their faces. Some whispered to each other while eyeing the decor. A few greeted me politely, scanning the venue like they were still trying to figure out what exactly was going on. I welcomed them warmly, thanked them for coming, and told them to take a seat wherever they liked. No one knew what was about to happen, not even the closest friends. I had told no one. This was between me, her, him, and the truth. And soon it would be public knowledge. Then, at 12:52 p.m., 8 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, she arrived. She looked stunning. Hairstyled in loose waves, a soft blush dress that floated just above her knees, heels that clicked across the stone path as she walked. She was smiling nervously, holding a small gift bag in her hand. When she saw me, her smile widened. "I can't believe you pulled this off," she said. "It's incredible." I smiled back and said, "I told you it would be a day to remember." She kissed me on the cheek and walked inside, mingling with a few familiar faces. She had no idea what was coming. At 12:57 p.m. he walked in. Alone. Dressed in a navy suit and tie, trying to look composed like he belonged there. And to be fair, he did, just not in the way he thought. The moment his eyes scanned the room and landed on her, I watched his entire face tighten. Confusion. Panic. He started to walk toward her but hesitated. She turned and saw him at the same time. Her smile faded instantly. The gift bag in her hand dropped slightly. Their eyes locked. They didn't speak. Didn't move. Just froze. And right there, before a single word was said, the truth began to bleed through. Guests around them turned their heads. Whispers grew louder. Someone laughed awkwardly, trying to diffuse the sudden tension. But no one could miss it, the energy in the air had shifted completely. I stepped up to the small platform at the front of the aisle, tapped the microphone, and let the feedback buzz into silence. Every eye turned toward me. The moment had arrived. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady, composed. "I know today's event may have seemed unconventional. A double celebration. 2 weddings. 1 story. And it is a story, one that deserves to be told. Not with champagne or applause, but with truth." There was a pause. Uneasy shuffling. People looked at each other, confused. She was staring at me now, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. He was pale, like all the blood had drained from his face. I continued. "See, sometimes people you love, the ones you trust the most, aren't who they pretend to be. They smile. They laugh. They hold your hand while lying to your face. And sometimes those lies aren't whispered in the dark. They're shared between 2 people who should have never crossed that line." There was a soft gasp from someone in the front row. "I was supposed to marry her," I said, motioning gently toward where she stood frozen. "He was supposed to stand beside me as my best man." I looked at both of them now. But instead, they decided to write their own vows. In secret. In hotel rooms. In private messages and sneaky excuses. They thought I wouldn't find out. They thought I'd never know. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. One woman covered her mouth. Someone else let out a whispered, "Oh my God." "But I did find out," I said, letting my voice rise just slightly. "And I decided I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't break. I would show them exactly what it feels like to be exposed. Not by force. Not with rage. Just with clarity." I stepped down from the platform and walked slowly toward them. She was trembling now, tears filling her eyes. He looked like he wanted to disappear. "This," I gestured to the venue, the flowers, the guests, "this is your real ceremony. Your real wedding. Because this is the moment where everyone sees you for who you really are." I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't wait for anyone to speak. I turned and walked away, straight down the aisle and out the front gates. I didn't need to see the rest. The silence, the confusion, the apologies, the panic, that was theirs to carry now. My part was done. I had told the story. The rest would write itself. I didn't look back as I walked out of that venue, but I could feel the weight of the silence chasing after me like a wave. It wasn't the kind of silence that followed something awkward. It was the kind that followed impact, the kind that forced people to sit with what they'd just witnessed and ask themselves how they missed all the signs. I got into my car, closed the door, and just sat there for a few minutes. No music, no distractions. Just breathing. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. The storm I had been carrying for weeks was gone. Not because I had gotten revenge, but because I had finally let the truth speak louder than the lies. They would be inside that venue, surrounded by everyone who used to respect them, trying to explain themselves to people who now looked at them differently. Every excuse, every justification, they would all fall flat. Because the truth didn't need dressing up. It was raw, undeniable, and now it was public. I drove away slowly, not with the urgency of someone escaping, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally closed a door and locked it behind him. That chapter was finished. There would be fallout, of course. I knew that. People would talk. Some would pick sides. Some might even try to defend them. But I didn't care. I hadn't done this for sympathy or support. I had done it to reclaim my peace. To let them feel the consequences of the games they played. And whatever came next, I wouldn't be the one hiding. Over the next few days, the messages started coming in. Friends, relatives, even people I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Some were shocked. Some said they'd had a feeling something was off. Others just said, "I'm sorry you had to go through that." I responded politely when I felt like it, but most of the time, I let the messages sit unread. I didn't need validation. I didn't need people to pick sides. What I had done wasn't about making a statement to the world. It was about holding two people accountable for what they did when they thought no one was watching. And judging by the silence from both of them, the message had landed. She didn't contact me at first. I think she was too embarrassed, too stunned by how quickly everything had unraveled. But a week later, she sent me a message. Just one sentence, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I realized I didn't want to say anything at all. I had already said everything I needed to. I didn't owe her closure. She had written her own ending when she decided to betray me with someone I called family. Still, curiosity got the better of me and I agreed to meet in a public place. No drama. No scene. Just a conversation to put the final nail in what was already a dead relationship. We met at a small cafe near the river. She looked different, less confident, more cautious. Her eyes were tired and there was a tension in her shoulders she couldn't hide. She sat across from me, fumbling with her hands, avoiding eye contact for the first full minute. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I don't even know where to begin. I said nothing. Just waited. She looked up at me, eyes watery. "I'm sorry. For everything. I never thought it would go this far. I didn't mean to hurt you." I held her gaze. "You didn't mean to get caught," I said calmly. "That's not the same thing." She flinched and I knew she wasn't ready to hear that truth, but she needed to. She tried to explain. Said things just happened with him. Said it started when we were going through a rough patch. That she felt neglected. Unseen. The usual lines. But all I could think was how many times I had asked her if she was okay. How many times I tried to plan something nice for her, make her laugh, show her she mattered. And how many times she looked me in the eye and told me everything was fine while sneaking off to be with him. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. I needed you to know that I regret it. That I regret all of it." I nodded. "Good. You should." We sat there in silence for a few more moments before I stood up. "Take care of yourself," I said. And that was it. No dramatic goodbye. No lingering words. Just an end. A clean one. One that should have come a long time ago. I never heard from him. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a vague apology. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't sorry. He was just ashamed. He knew he'd burned a bridge that could never be rebuilt, and instead of facing it, he ran from it. That's who he really was. Not a friend. Not a brother. Just a coward hiding behind the silence. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding myself. I cut ties with people who only came around for drama. I spent more time on the things I had neglected: my health, my work, my peace. I rediscovered what it felt like to be alone without being lonely. And slowly, I stopped thinking about them. They became background noise in a life that was finally becoming mine again. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but it stopped controlling me. And one day, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about them at all the day before. That was the real win. That was freedom. This wasn't a story about revenge. Not really. It was a story about reclaiming control, about turning betrayal into something useful. A warning. A reminder. And for anyone who's ever been betrayed, I hope you understand this. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to break things to break someone's illusion. Sometimes the quietest moves have the loudest echoes. In the days that followed, the dust didn't settle, it just shifted. People kept talking. The videos from the fake wedding had made their way onto social media. Some guests had recorded parts of my speech, not understanding what they were witnessing at first, but instinctively sensing it was something they'd never see again. One video had already hit over 100,000 views within 2 days. I didn't post it, didn't ask for the attention, but there it was, my story, our story, spreading like wildfire. Comment sections exploded with opinions. Strangers were taking sides, analyzing every word, turning my moment into content. Some called it epic, others said it was too cruel. But the truth was, I didn't care. Let them dissect it. Let them debate. I hadn't done it for the audience. I'd done it for myself. For closure. For truth. And I'd gotten both. She, on the other hand, had vanished. After our meeting at the cafe, I never saw her again. A mutual friend told me she quit her job and moved out of town. Whether it was because of the shame, the attention, or the fallout with her family, I didn't know. And I didn't ask. It wasn't my burden anymore. What surprised me more was how many people quietly reached out to say they admired what I did. Not because I humiliated her, but because I had taken something ugly and turned it into a statement. One person said, "You made her look in the mirror without ever raising your voice." That stuck with me. That's what I had intended all along. Not revenge. Reflection. But the part that lingered longer than expected was him. My so-called best friend. I kept expecting some kind of message, even if it was just a pathetic attempt to explain himself. But nothing came. Radio silence. Weeks passed, then months. Not a word. Not even when one of our shared friends passed away unexpectedly and I saw his name pop up in a group thread about the funeral. He didn't respond. Didn't attend. Didn't even send condolences. He had become a ghost in his own circle. And that told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just avoiding me. He was avoiding everyone. Cowardice in its purest form. At some point, curiosity got the better of me and I searched him online. His social media had gone dark. No new posts, no interactions. Just silence. But I did find something, a single comment on an old post from a woman I didn't recognize. It simply read, "Maybe if you treated your friends with the loyalty you demand, you'd still have some." It made me smile, a small, bitter smile, because it confirmed what I already knew. He hadn't just betrayed me. He was the kind of person who would eventually betray anyone who got close enough. His downfall wasn't just what he did to me, it was who he really was when no one was watching. And that was the difference between us. I didn't need to run or hide. I faced everything. The lies. The humiliation. The truth. I stood in front of a room full of people and tore off the mask that both of them wore so proudly. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I simply showed the truth. And the truth did the rest. People often ask me now if I've moved on. If I've started dating again. The answer is yes and no. I've gone on dates. I've had conversations. But I'm not rushing. I'm not looking to fill a void or replace something. Because what I lost wasn't just a relationship. I lost trust. In others. In myself. And trust isn't something you rebuild overnight. It's something you earn slowly, piece by piece. I'm taking my time now. Listening more. Observing more. Learning to spot the little signs I ignored before. There's a calm that comes after the storm. It's not peace exactly, it's more like clarity. The kind of clarity that makes you realize how blind you were. How many red flags you justified. How many truths you smothered with hope. That's what betrayal does. It burns away the illusions. And if you let it, it can make you stronger. Sharper. Smarter. Not bitter, just better. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how different things could have been. If she had told me the truth. If he had respected our friendship. If I had caught them sooner. But those thoughts pass quickly now. Because I know how that version of the story ends, with me still stuck in a lie. Still holding on to people who weren't holding on to me. That's not a life I want. Not anymore. What I did that day, standing on that platform, speaking my truth, it wasn't about her. Or him. It was about me. Choosing myself. Reclaiming my voice. And as I move forward, I do so without regret. Because no matter what anyone says, I know I didn't lose. I ended something toxic. I freed myself. And I did it with my head held high. Months passed and life settled into a quieter rhythm. The chaos faded. The attention from the double wedding spectacle died down. People moved on to the next viral drama, the next relationship scandal, the next public unraveling. But for me, the aftermath was more than internet fodder. It was a period of reconstruction, of returning to myself. I had spent so long giving pieces of my heart to people who didn't know how to hold them, who didn't respect the weight of what I was offering. And when it all shattered, I thought the pain would last forever. I thought the betrayal would define me. But now, standing in the wreckage of what was, I saw something unexpected: freedom. Not just from them, but from the version of me that tolerated half-truths, that swallowed doubts, that settled for less than honesty. The man who walked out of that wedding wasn't the same man who had walked into it. And that was the greatest revenge of all. I focused on rebuilding, not relationships, but the parts of myself I had neglected. I started writing again. Journaling. Pouring thoughts onto paper, not for anyone else, just for me. I picked up old hobbies. Went hiking. Took road trips. Spent time in places where no one knew me, where no one saw me as the guy from that wedding. I learned to enjoy my own company again. To sit in silence without the weight of questions or suspicion. I found peace in simple routines: early morning coffee, long runs, slow evenings. And somewhere along the way, the ghost stopped following me. Her voice, his betrayal, the echo of that final confrontation, they dulled. Became memories, not wounds. And when they did surface, it wasn't with pain, it was with perspective. One afternoon, I ran into someone who had been at the event. A distant friend of a friend. We hadn't spoken since. He hesitated when he saw me, then said, "Man, I still think about what you did. I've never seen anything like it." I smiled politely, unsure how to respond. He continued, "You didn't just expose them, you reminded all of us not to ignore our gut." That was bold. Respect. I thanked him and moved on, but his words lingered. Not because I needed the praise, but because I realized something: my story had become a mirror for others. A cautionary tale? A lesson. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it didn't have to be more than that. I did start dating again eventually. Carefully. Slowly. I took my time. I asked better questions. Paid closer attention. I didn't go looking for perfection, I looked for honesty, for consistency, for someone who didn't make me feel like I had to constantly guess where I stood. And when red flags appeared, I didn't ignore them. I trusted my instincts, even when it hurt. Because one thing betrayal teaches you is that the most dangerous lies are the ones you tell yourself to keep others close. As for them, her and him, I never heard from him again. Not a word. Last I heard, he moved across the country. Changed jobs. Cut ties with almost everyone from our old circle. She, on the other hand, sent me one final message a few months later. It was long. Rambling. A mix of apology and reflection. She said she'd been going to therapy, that she was working on herself, that she finally understood the damage she'd done. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, but because there was nothing left to say. Her closure wasn't my responsibility. I had already made peace with everything she had broken. I didn't need her words. I didn't need her guilt. I had let go. Now, when I tell the story, I do it differently. I don't speak with bitterness. I don't focus on the betrayal. I focus on the transformation. I tell people about how I learned to stop chasing validation from people who couldn't see my worth. How I discovered strength in silence. How I walked into the fire and came out clearer, sharper, stronger. It's not a tragedy anymore. It's a turning point. We all go through moments that threaten to define us. Moments that split us open and demand we choose who we're going to be on the other side. For me, it wasn't just being cheated on. It was the choice to face it head-on. To make a statement without raising my voice. To create a moment so undeniable, so raw, that no lie could survive inside it. And when the smoke cleared, I was still standing. Not because I had won, but because I had refused to break. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever trusted someone who shattered that trust, let this be your reminder: you are not weak for loving deeply. You are not foolish for believing in someone. The betrayal is not your failure, it's theirs. And you don't need to destroy someone to reclaim your power. Sometimes all you have to do is tell the truth and walk away. Thank you for watching. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe for more stories like this. You're not alone. And your story isn't over.